Dale saw Carol Ann laugh, leaning into Earl Johnson, right there in the crowded mall food court. Her hand rested on Earl's arm as he whispered, their heads close. Dale felt the concrete floor sway beneath him, his chest tightening. Earl caught his eye, a cold smirk spreading across his face. "Some men just don't understand progress," he mouthed. The air in the Dubai Mall was thick with the scent of spices and expensive perfumes, a jarring contrast to the acrid taste in Dale Miller's mouth. He watched the throngs of people, their carefree chatter a dull roar against the silence in his own head. His hand, calloused from years of service, gripped an empty soda cup, the plastic cool against his skin. Beneath his polo shirt, the cold steel of his concealed sidearm pressed into his ribs, a familiar, heavy comfort that felt increasingly necessary in this place of false opulence. Dale was a man built for precision and vigilance, a former Navy SEAL who had transitioned his skills to the intricate world of cybersecurity. He knew how to look for vulnerabilities, how to exploit them, how to defend against them. But he had never anticipated the vulnerability that would be exposed by his own home, by the woman he had sworn to protect. The past few weeks had been a slow, agonizing unraveling, each new piece of information a gut punch. He had pieced it together, late nights spent tracing digital breadcrumbs, connecting the dots of betrayal. Carol Ann, his wife, was involved with Earl Johnson, an infamous arms dealer known for his ruthless tactics and extensive network of black market connections. The shock of it still made his stomach clench. Earl Johnson was not just a name in a file anymore. He was a phantom figure pulling strings, reaching into Dale's life with Carol Ann's complicity. They weren't just having an affair. They were leveraging sensitive information Dale had once accessed, data from his past military contracts, planning something much larger and far more dangerous. The realization that they were plotting against him, using his own secrets as currency, left him with a cold, righteous anger. It wasn't just a breach of trust, it was an act of war. He pulled out a prepaid burner phone, its cheap plastic feeling foreign in his hand after years of high-end government-issued devices. This was his last resort, a desperate Hail Mary after exhausting every other avenue. His usual contacts were compromised, his secure channels burned. He had found a whispered name, K2 Executive Services, a shadow company known for its discreet, effective solutions when conventional means failed. He typed the number slowly, his thumb pressing down with a deliberate focus that belied the tremor in his hand. The call connected, a series of muted clicks, then an automated voice. He waited, his breath held, then without warning the line went dead. No explanation, no ringback, just a flat, frustrating silence. He stared at the phone, a jolt of helpless rage shooting through him. Alone. He was utterly, completely alone in this desert. A moment later, the phone vibrated again. A text message. Not a number he recognized, just a string of characters and an internet link. His jaw tightened. Desperation warred with a lifetime of cybersecurity caution. He knew better than to tap unknown links. But what choice did he have? He tapped it. The screen flashed. A quick download progress bar. Then an app icon appeared. A stylized K2, sharp angles against the dark background. He tapped the icon and the app opened. A low, muffled voice, devoid of inflection, spoke through the phone's speaker. "Hold the device at arm's length," the voice instructed, flat and calm. Dale obeyed, extending his arm. The screen flickered, a soft flash, and then his own face stared back at him. His eyes were wide, a mask of shock overlaid with a raw, nascent anger that showed through the paleness of his skin. He saw the grim set of his jaw, the tightness around his mouth. It was the face of a man who had seen too much, betrayed by what he held most dear. "Name, please," the voice asked, unchanging. "Dale Miller," he said, his own voice sounding distant, foreign. "Explain your situation," the voice continued. Dale didn't hesitate. The words came out precise, factual, stripped of any discernible emotion. "My wife is involved with an arms dealer, Earl Johnson. They're leaking information I once had access to." He left out the plotting against me part, letting the implications hang in the air. The voice was silent for a moment. Then a generic hold music began to play, a tinny, incongruous melody in the bustling mall. He listened, feeling the weight of the phone, the world shrinking to this small device and the voice on the other end. After what felt like an eternity, the whole music cut off. Proceed to the south entrance of the mall, the voice instructed. A vehicle will be waiting. Dale lowered the phone, the K2 icon still glowing faintly on the screen. He looked around the vast concourse, the faces of strangers blurring into an indifferent mosaic. The anger was still there, a cold ember, but now it was joined by something else. A grim, steel-hard resolve. He had made his move. He was ready to act. Dale pushed through the mall's festive atmosphere, the forced cheer of the holiday season feeling like a thin veneer over his own grim reality. He made his way from the food court, affecting a casual stroll. His senses, however, were on high alert. His eyes flicked from face to face, scanning reflections in storefront windows, his periphery constantly active. Checking his six was an instinct ingrained by years of training, a silent reflex that now served him in this glittering, dangerous labyrinth. He felt the phantom weight of a rifle in his hands, the familiar rhythm of patrol in an unfamiliar landscape. He moved through the crowds, past high-end boutiques and glittering displays, the smell of expensive coffee and baked goods mingling with the faint, metallic scent of ozone from the sheer volume of electronics. The 20 minutes he spent navigating the winding walkways felt like an hour, each step a calculated risk. Finally, he saw it, the familiar universal symbol of a restroom tucked away near the mall's south entrance. A small flicker of relief quickly extinguished by the heightened tension he felt. As he neared the entrance to the men's room, a hand clamped firmly onto his arm. It wasn't a casual touch, but a grip of intent, unyielding. Dale stiffened, his body instinctively preparing for a fight. A man stood beside him, impeccably dressed in a dark tailored suit that seemed out of place among the shoppers. His features were sharp, his eyes cold, and a faint Eastern European accent tinged his low, urgent voice. "Keep moving, Mr. Miller," the man said, his grip tightening. As he spoke, his other hand moved subtly beneath his jacket, revealing the dark, glinting barrel of a small firearm, briefly, almost subliminally. Dale's eyes narrowed. He recognized the man, not from a file, but from a chaotic, brutal morning just a few weeks ago, outside his own home, when his world had begun to tilt irrevocably. A team had been sent to persuade him, a heavy-handed message from Earl Johnson. Dale had barely escaped. This man had been part of that crew. "It's you," Dale stated, his voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion. No surprise, just a cold acknowledgement of a known threat. The man gave a curt nod. "Indeed. No trouble here, Mr. Miller. Not in this public space." His gaze swept over the milling crowd, a subtle warning in his tone. They walked past a young girl with a bright purple backpack, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone, utterly absorbed in her digital world, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding beside her. "K2's cameras located you," the man continued, his voice barely a murmur. "Facial recognition is quite effective now. We knew you were coming." He steered Dale gently but firmly, leading him away from the main concourse, into a quieter, less trafficked hallway by the bathrooms, around a corner where the foot traffic thinned to almost nothing. Suddenly, a loud, sickening thud echoed in the confined space. It wasn't a gunshot, but something blunt, forceful. The man beside Dale stumbled, a guttural sound escaping him, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and pain. He collapsed heavily to the polished floor, his stylish suit rumpling. Standing behind him, holding a large, industrial-looking wrench, was the girl with the purple backpack. Her face was utterly blank, her expression unreadable. She moved with a practiced, unsettling efficiency. She knelt beside the fallen man, briefly checked his pulse, or perhaps just confirmed his unconsciousness, then swiftly reached into his pockets. She retrieved his wallet and his phone, her movements fluid and decisive. With a quick flick of her wrist, she pried open the phone, removed its battery, and tossed it aside, effectively disabling any tracking or remote wiping. The wallet and the now-dead phone went into her own pocket. She straightened up, then extended a hand to Dale, her serious expression slowly shifting into a slight, fierce smile. "I've always wanted to say that," she said, her voice clear and surprisingly youthful. "Come with me if you want to be safe." Dale looked at the unconscious man, then at the wrench, then at her. "No injuries, just a strong wish for revenge," he replied, his voice still low, assessing. She nodded, her smile deepening, a flash of determination in her eyes. "I'm your K2 contact," she said, finally introducing herself. "Call me Bonnie Mae Jenkins." "Can we leave before more of Johnson's people arrive?" Dale asked, a new urgency in his tone. He knew Earl Johnson's network, and he knew they wouldn't send just one man. Bonnie Mae's smile widened further, taking on a fierce, almost predatory edge. "Oh, we're going to do more than that," she said, her gaze steady. "We're going to take the fight to them." The air in the K2 vehicle, a nondescript sedan, was cooler, hushed, a welcome change from the mall's artificial cheer. As Bonnie Mae navigated the labyrinthine parking garage, Dale began to speak, his voice low and even, recounting the brutal unraveling of his life. He told her about Carol Ann, the woman he had married, the woman who had shared his home and his secrets, and her shocking alliance with Earl Johnson. He laid out the facts, the sensitive information, the precise nature of the data they were selling, military intelligence, cybersecurity protocols, names of assets. He didn't embellish, didn't infuse it with emotion, simply presented the cold, hard details of betrayal and the immense danger it now posed not just to him, but to others. Bonnie Mae listened, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, but Dale could see the subtle tightening around her mouth, the hardening in her eyes. It was a reflection of his own simmering anger, a shared understanding of the stakes. When he finished, the silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the hum of the engine. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her voice calm, practical, as they finally exited the garage and merged onto the highway. Dale had been running scenarios in his head for weeks. "First, we need the evidence," he stated, the words clipped and precise. "It's not just about what they've done to me, but what they're doing with the data. I have a secure hidden office in my house. It's got the hard drives, the backups, everything I've been able to gather. That's our leverage." He paused, a grim resolve settling deeper within him. "After that, we confront Carol Ann and Earl. There would be no kindness, no polite discussions. The time for civility was long past." Bonnie Mae glanced at him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was sharp, a little dangerous. "I like your approach, Dale," she said, her voice dry. "Let's make them regret crossing you." A strong sense of purpose, cold and unyielding, washed over Dale. The weight of despair that had been pressing down on him for weeks began to lift, replaced by a steely determination. He wouldn't stop, wouldn't rest, until he had exacted his justice, until the scales were balanced. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen, about holding accountable those who thought they could operate in the shadows, immune to consequence. The drive to his house was tense, the city lights blurring into streaks as Bonnie Mae pushed the car a little faster. Every car that lingered in their rearview mirror, every shadow that darted across the periphery, felt like a potential threat. He knew Johnson wouldn't give up easily, especially if he thought Dale had something he wanted. The paranoia, once a professional necessity, now felt deeply personal. As they turned onto his quiet, tree-lined street, Dale's gaze instantly fixed on his driveway. Carol Ann's sleek, obsidian-black Aston Martin sat there, a glaring symbol of her new life, a stark contrast to his own modest sedan. It gleamed under the streetlights, polished and ostentatious. Dale knew Earl Johnson had gifted it to her just last month, a testament to her new allegiances, her new loyalties. "Nice car," he muttered, the sarcasm thick and heavy, tasting like ash in his mouth. Bonnie Mae didn't respond, simply drove past his house, parking a block away under the deeper shadow of an ancient oak tree. They exited the vehicle silently, moving with a practiced stealth that belied their civilian clothes. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant desert dust. They approached the house on foot, keeping to the shadows, moving deliberately and quietly. As they neared, Dale guided Bonnie Mae to a vantage point behind a dense shrubbery, allowing them a clear, unobstructed view into the living room window. The lights were on. Inside, Carol Ann was pacing back and forth, a phone pressed to her ear. Her movements were agitated, her free hand gesticulating, a clear sign of distress. She looked frantic, her usually composed demeanor shattered. "Looks like someone's anxious," Bonnie Mae whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes sharp and assessing. Dale watched Carol Ann, a cold, hard knot forming in his stomach. He saw not the woman he had loved, but a co-conspirator, a traitor. The sight of her agitated state, however, sparked an idea. He began to formulate a plan, the pieces clicking into place with the precision of a trained operator. "I'll create a distraction," he whispered back, his gaze fixed on the house. "You retrieve the data. The office is in the basement, behind the main storage area." Dale quickly relayed the instructions for his hidden office to Bonnie May. "It's in the study," he whispered, gesturing subtly toward the side of the house. "Behind a panel disguised as part of the wall. You pull the copy of War and Peace on the third bookshelf from the left. It's a first edition, leather-bound. That'll trigger the latch." He made sure his directions were clear, concise, leaving no room for error. Bonnie May nodded, her gaze sharp, taking it all in. "And if she tries to stop me?" she asked, her voice low, a hint of something dangerous in her eyes. Dale looked at his house, at the life he had built and that she had so carelessly dismantled. His voice was cold, flat. "Do what you need to do," he said, the words cutting through the night air. He paused, then added, "But leave her unharmed. I want answers before this ends. Every last one of them." There was no rage in his voice, just an icy certainty. Bonnie May simply nodded again, a silent agreement passing between them. With the grace of a shadow, she melted away into the darkness, moving towards the back of the house, her path unseen. Dale watched her disappear, then took a deep, steadying breath. He felt the cold steel of his resolve hardening in his chest. He wasn't going in blindly, he was going in with purpose. He walked deliberately to the front door, the familiar path now feeling alien, charged with a new, bitter significance. He lifted his hand and rang the doorbell. The chime, a pleasant, everyday sound, seemed to echo too loudly in the quiet night. The door opened almost immediately. Carol Ann stood there, framed in the soft glow of the entryway. Her face, usually so composed and carefully maintained, was a mask of utter shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her manicured hand, still holding her phone, hung suspended. "Dale," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "But how?" He didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed past her, stepping into the house he still called home. His eyes already sweeping the room, checking corners, scanning for any hidden threats. The air inside felt heavy, thick with unspoken lies. "Surprised to see me?" he said, a faint, humorless smirk touching his lips. "Sorry to disappoint." Carol Ann, always quick to adapt, tried to regain her footing. Her shock quickly shifted into a well-practiced facade of concern, her eyes softening, her voice tinged with feigned relief. "Dale, thank God you're safe," she exclaimed, moving towards him, as if to embrace him. "I was so worried after I heard about the attack." "Where have you been?" "I tried calling." "Save it," Dale interrupted, his voice cutting through her performance, devoid of any warmth or emotion. He held up a hand, stopping her advance. Her words were hollow, a transparent lie. "I know everything, Carol Ann, about Earl Johnson and the secret information you've been selling. All of it." He watched her face, the subtle flicker of fear in her eyes as her composure began to crack. He laid it out for her, not as accusations, but as unassailable facts. "I know about the data you gave him, the protocols, the names. I know about the money, the new car in the driveway, the life you're building with him. I know you were talking to him just now, moments before I rang the doorbell." He left no room for denial, no crack for her to slip through. The details were too precise, too damning. Carol Ann's face paled, the color draining from her cheeks as the full weight of her exposed deception hit her. Her eyes darted around the room as if seeking an escape, but there was none. She tried to regain control, to summon some semblance of indignation or denial, but Dale's steady, unwavering gaze and his cold, calm tone rattled her. The practiced lies caught in her throat. He pressed her, his questions pointed and relentless, cutting through the thin air. "How much? What else did you give him? What was the end game? I want to know the full extent of your involvement, Carol Ann, every last detail." He needed answers, and he wouldn't stop until he had them. Carol Ann, cornered and exposed, quickly reverted to denial. She began to twist the truth, her voice rising in a desperate attempt to regain control. "Dale, you don't understand," she pleaded, her eyes wide, feigning distress. "Earl Earl manipulated me. He threatened me. He said he'd hurt you if I didn't cooperate. I was trying to protect you." Her words tumbled out, a tangled web of half-truths and outright fabrications. But Dale wasn't buying it. His years of training as a SEAL and then a cybersecurity expert had honed his ability to detect subtle tells. The slight shift in her gaze, the forced tremor in her voice, the way her hand nervously clutched at the fabric of her blouse. He had interrogated countless individuals, and Carol Ann's performance, while passable for most, was transparent to him. He could see the fear in her eyes, but it was the fear of being caught, not the fear of a genuine threat. "Stop it, Carol Ann," he said, his voice hard, cutting through her narrative. "I know about the transfer to the offshore account last month. I know about the encryption keys you gave him for Project Nightingale. I know about the meeting in Monaco where you handed over the schematics for the drone defense system." He listed the details, each specific point a nail in her coffin of lies. "He didn't threaten you. You chose this. You sold me out, and you sold our country out, for money and for him." The mention of the specific transactions, the unassailable evidence he had accumulated, broke her. Her face, already pale, lost all semblance of color. The practiced indignation vanished, replaced by stark terror. Realizing the game was unequivocally up, that there was no more pretending, Carol Ann made a desperate lunge. She bolted towards the back door, her heels clacking on the polished hardwood floor, her only thought escape. Just as her fingers brushed the cold metal of the door handle, the study door swung open. Bonnie Mae Jenkins stood there, a small, black USB drive held aloft in her hand, her expression unreadable. "Got it," Bonnie Mae stated, her voice calm and clear, the two words echoing with the weight of irrefutable evidence. Carol Ann froze, her hand still hovering over the doorknob. She stared at the USB drive, then at Bonnie Mae, then back at Dale. Her last route was blocked, her desperate gamble failing in spectacular fashion. Dale, anticipating her move, stepping forward, positioning himself directly between Carol Ann and the door, cutting off any remaining chance of escape. "It's over, Carol Ann," Dale said, his voice heavy with a bitter finality. The words were not a threat, but a statement of undeniable fact. No more running. The fight drained out of her completely. Her shoulders slumped, when she collapsed into a nearby armchair, her body dissolving into a defeated heap. The carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely, and tears, real tears this time, began to stream down her face, leaving tracks in her makeup. The sound of her choked sobs filled the room. Dale looked at her, at the woman he had loved, the woman who was now a stranger. The pain, which he had so rigorously suppressed, finally broke through, a sharp, unexpected ache in his chest. "Why, Carol Ann?" he asked, his voice raw, betraying the depth of his hurt. "Why did you do this? What was it worth?" Through her tears, she managed to speak, her voice choked and broken. Earl, he promised me everything, Dale. A life of luxury, power, respect. You were so consumed by your work, by your duty, I felt unfulfilled, trapped. He made me feel important, seen. He said we could have it all." The words were a torrent of self-pity and misplaced ambition, a desperate attempt to justify her monstrous betrayal. Dale listened, a profound sense of loss and disgust washing over him. He watched her unravel, saw the true measure of her character laid bare. It wasn't about love or even fear. It was about greed, ambition, and a shallow yearning for more. The woman he knew, the woman he had married, was gone. Bonnie Mae remained a silent, stoic presence, observing the scene with a detached professionalism. The USB drive was still clutched in her hand, the quiet proof of Carol Ann's treachery. She was ready to intervene if necessary, but for now, the emotional wreckage was Dale's to navigate. Life's choices, especially the costly ones, often come with consequences that ripple far beyond the initial decision. Stick around to the end to see how these choices unfold for everyone involved. With the USB drive secured and Carol Ann's confession still echoing in the cold living room, Dale and Bonnie Mae shifted their focus entirely to Earl Johnson. The recovered data, a treasure trove of encrypted files and communication logs, became their roadmap. Dale, with his precise cybersecurity skills, began to sift through the digital debris, identifying IP addresses, cross-referencing satellite images, and piecing together Johnson's movements and locations. Bonnie May, observing his methodical process, occasionally interjected with tactical insights, suggesting ways to verify a location or bypass a potential digital trap. It didn't take long. Johnson, for all his cunning, had left a digital footprint. They pinpointed his secure compound, a sprawling, secluded property far from town, cunningly disguised as a legitimate rural business, a front for his illicit operations. The satellite imagery revealed high fences, infrared sensors, and what looked like reinforced entry points. "I'm going in," Dale stated, his voice flat, devoid of question. "I'm leading the infiltration." The decision was driven by more than just duty. It was personal, fueled by the raw, bitter taste of betrayal. This was his reckoning. Bonnie May met his gaze, her expression serious. "That changes things, Dale," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "Personal involvement adds risk. Johnson isn't just a target, he's dangerous. His security is professional. We're talking about armed personnel, possibly booby traps, certainly advanced surveillance. Any misstep, and it's over." She outlined the myriad risks, laying them bare, ensuring Dale understood the gravity of his insistence. Dale listened, absorbing every detail. "I understand the risks," he said, his eyes unwavering. "I'll handle the cyber side. You handle the tactical." They spent hours formulating a plan. Dale's expertise would focus on bypassing Johnson's sophisticated electronic security systems, cameras, motion sensors, alarms. Bonnie May's role would involve neutralizing the physical threats, securing the perimeter, and ensuring their entry was swift and silent. It was a fusion of digital and physical warfare, each relying on the other for success. Under the cover of a moonless night, they approached the compound. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and wild grasses. They moved silently through the overgrown fields bordering the property, their figures barely discernible against the dark landscape. Every step was deliberate, every shadow a potential hiding spot. Dale, hunkered down behind a thick bush, worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the small, custom-built device he carried. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, a silent battle waged against Johnson's digital defenses. One by one, the external cameras flickered, then went dark. The hum of the invisible laser grids went silent. The alarms, once a formidable deterrent, were now inert. He was a ghost in the system, bypassing layers of security Johnson had so carefully constructed. Meanwhile, Bonnie May, moving with the fluidity of a predator, secured the perimeter. She moved from shadow to shadow, a silent, efficient force. Two armed guards patrolling the fence line never knew what hit them. Her movements were precise, swift, a blur of motion as she neutralized them, rendering them unconscious without a sound. With the perimeter compromised and the digital defenses breached, they reached the main building. Dale deftly picked the lock on a reinforced service door, and they slipped inside, moving through the silent corridors. They found Johnson's control room in the basement, a heavily fortified space. Earl Johnson sat there, oblivious, bathed in the glow of a dozen monitors displaying complex data, stock market graphs, and a web of global communications. He was hunched over a console, completely engrossed in his empire of deceit. He had no idea his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. Dale stepped into the room, his suppressed pistol already aimed directly at Johnson's head. The click of his safety being disengaged broke the silence. "It's over, Earl," Dale said, his voice cold and steady, the words hanging heavy in the air. Johnson jumped, startled, his eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of fear. He instinctively reached for a hidden drawer beneath his console, where Dale knew a weapon would be. But Dale was faster. He took another step forward, closing the distance, his aim unwavering. A brief, tense standoff ensued. Johnson's hand hovered, suspended, his eyes darting between Dale's unwavering gaze and the pistol. The air in the room crackled with unspoken threats, with the accusations of betrayal that had brought them to this dark room. "Dale, wait," Johnson stammered, his voice losing its usual arrogance, tinged with desperation. "Let's be reasonable. We can make a deal. Money, information, anything you want. I have resources. We can work something out." He started to rise, trying to project an air of control, even as his eyes betrayed his fear. Dale merely shook his head, a grim, humorless expression on his face. He wasn't here for a deal. He was here for something much simpler, much older. He was here for justice. "No deals, Earl," he said, his voice flat, resolute. "Your time for bargaining is over." Dale moved with practiced efficiency. With his gun still aimed, he ordered Johnson to slowly lift his hands, then carefully disarmed him, finding a small, ornate pistol tucked into a shoulder holster. He secured Johnson with a set of plastic cuffs Bonnie May had provided, ensuring the arms dealer was rendered harmless. Bonnie May, ever vigilant, positioned herself by the only door, her own weapon at the ready, her gaze sweeping the room, ensuring no other threats or escape routes existed. The control room, once a symbol of Johnson's power, was now his cage. Dale began the interrogation, his voice calm, steady, and dangerously devoid of inflection. "Tell me everything, Earl," he demanded, his eyes never leaving Johnson's face. "Every name, every operation, every piece of information you have compromised. The full extent of the harm you have caused." There was no anger in his tone, just a chilling, unwavering demand for truth. Johnson, initially defiant, attempted to bluster, to maintain an air of control. "You'll get nothing from me, Miller. You're out of your league." But his bravado quickly withered under Dale's relentless pressure, the precision of his questions, and Bonnie May's silent, stern presence by the door. She didn't speak, but her unwavering gaze was a physical weight, a constant reminder of their resolve. Johnson realized he had nowhere to run, no leverage left. Slowly, haltingly at first, then with increasing detail, Johnson began to break. He revealed the intricate network of his operations. Shell companies and offshore accounts, high-ranking officials he had compromised, the names of other arms dealers, the precise locations of hidden arsenals. He detailed the larger conspiracy at play, a global web of illicit trade and geopolitical destabilization. He spoke of clients in rogue states, of weapons deals that had reshaped conflicts, of intelligence operatives who had been sacrificed for profit. Dale, using a small, specialized recording device he carried, captured every word. He asked pointed questions, cross-referencing details with the data from the USB drive, ensuring enough corroborating evidence for any future legal proceedings. He wasn't just looking for a confession. He was building a case, a comprehensive dossier of Johnson's crimes. In a desperate attempt to salvage some shred of his own skin, Johnson tried to implicate Carol Ann, attempting to shift the blame entirely onto her. "She was eager, Miller," he sneered, a flash of his old arrogance returning. "More than you know. She saw the opportunity, said you were too focused on duty to see the bigger picture. She wanted the money, the power. She loved the thrill of it." Dale simply looked at him, his expression unchanged. He already knew the truth about Carol Ann. He had seen it in her face, heard it in her confession. He dismissed Johnson's attempts to deflect blame, not because he believed Carol Ann was innocent, but because her guilt was a separate, already established fact. Johnson's testimony only solidified it. As Johnson continued to speak, Dale grappled with the morality of his actions. He was here seeking justice, yes, but also a measure of personal vengeance. The line between the two was thin, blurred by the raw emotion of betrayal. Was he simply a vengeful husband or an agent of true justice? He felt the weight of that question. Bonnie May, sensing his internal struggle, spoke for the first time since the interrogation began. "Our mission, Dale," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "is to bring down dangerous criminals. That's the priority, not just satisfying personal vendettas." Her words were a clear, concise reminder, grounding him back in their professional purpose. The raw truth of Carol Ann's deep, willing involvement, confirmed now by Johnson's cold, factual account, cut Dale deeply. She wasn't a victim, not truly. She was a participant, a partner in crime, driven by her own greed and ambition. The words confirmed his darkest suspicions, solidifying the image of a woman he no longer recognized. The woman he had married, the life they had shared, was a lie. The immense weight of his broken marriage settled heavily on Dale, a crushing burden, a hollow ache in his chest that no amount of justice for Johnson could truly fill. With Earl Johnson secured, bound, and his comprehensive confession recorded, the immediate objective was complete. Bonnie May, her face grim but satisfied, retrieved a satellite phone from her pack. She moved to a quieter corner of the control room, her voice low and efficient as she relayed their status to K2. The communication was brief, coded. She requested extraction and the official handover of Johnson, emphasizing the sensitive nature of the intelligence they had gathered. The response was swift and precise. Within the hour, the quiet of the rural compound was broken by the distant whine of sirens. Local police cruisers, followed by unmarked federal vehicles, converged on the property. A small, disciplined team from K2, moving with an air of quiet authority, led the charge, directing the local and federal agents to Johnson in the wealth of evidence. Dale watched as Earl Johnson, stripped of his power and his arrogance, was escorted out of his own compound, led into the harsh glare of flashing blue and red lights. Johnson shot a final venomous glare at Dale, a silent promise of future retribution that Dale met with an unflinching gaze. The arms dealer was placed in the back of a federal vehicle, his global empire beginning to crumble around him. Dale felt a hollow victory, a strange emptiness in the place where he expected triumph. Justice was served, yes, but the cost had been immense. His thoughts immediately turned to Carol Ann. Her confession, Johnson's confirmation of her willing participation, it all painted a clear picture. He faced the inevitable legal repercussions for her actions. There would be investigations, interrogations, and charges. He knew her choices had led her here, to this bitter end, and while he felt no pity for her betrayal, the thought of her future brought a cold, heavy sadness. His old life, the suburban tranquility of his Midwestern home, was shattered beyond repair. The foundation of his marriage, of his perceived reality, had disintegrated, leaving behind only rubble. As the last of the official vehicles pulled away, taking Johnson into the night, Bonnie Mae turned to Dale. Her face, usually so composed, held a hint of something unstated. "The offer still stands, Dale," she said, her voice soft, almost an invitation. "You can go back, try to rebuild whatever's left. Or, you can join us. K2 needs people like you, people with your skills, your resolve." Dale looked out at the eastern horizon. The first faint blush of dawn was painting the sky, chasing away the last vestiges of night. The rural landscape, quiet and unassuming, began to emerge from the darkness. It was a symbol, he realized, of a new beginning, a choice point. He reflected on his journey, the raw pain of the betrayal, the sickening truth of the infidelity, the cold satisfaction of the revenge he had sought, and the complex moral dilemmas that had twisted in his gut. He had walked a path of destruction, and while he had confronted his demons, he couldn't simply return to a life that no longer existed. The man who had entered that mall had been broken. The man standing here now was tempered, changed, forged anew by fire. He looked at Bonnie Mae, her figure outlined against the emerging light. He nodded, a quiet, resolute gesture that spoke volumes. He had found a new purpose, a new direction in the wreckage of his past. The sun was fully above the horizon as Dale drove away from the compound, Bonnie Mae beside him in the K2 sedan. He didn't look back at the place where his old life had irrevocably ended. He left behind the wreckage of his past, the broken trust, the quiet despair. The future was uncertain, a landscape yet unmapped, but he faced it with a grim, resolute certainty. He was moving forward towards a new horizon, embracing a path of continued action and purpose, leaving the ghosts of his former life in the rearview mirror.